Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP, our bi-weekly conversation in which AARP staff and volunteers talk with Connecticut decision makers about policies and programs that are of interest to older residents. My name is John Erlingheuser, and I'm the Director of Advocacy and Community Outreach for AARP Connecticut. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by one of our great AARP Connecticut volunteers, Jean Caron. Thanks for joining us today, Jean. And do you want to tell folks a little bit about what you do for AARP and a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I live in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, and I am a retired private banker, worked throughout the state of Connecticut, working on trust and investments, lending, you name it, I did it all. Before I retired, I spent a couple of years working for some nonprofits, doing fund development, had a really great working life. So when I was retired, I was pretty bored very quickly, and a friend introduced me to AARP, and I first got involved working on presentations and not really doing the advocacy work at first. But then I met John and the other advocacy folks, and it really hit me. I thought, this is something I'd really love to do. Did a lot of public speaking in my career, and so thus I love doing testimony and making presentations, and really letting the citizens of Connecticut know about some of the great things that AARP works at for their benefit and other programs that would be helpful to them.
Great.
So that's me.
Oh, great, Jean, and we appreciate Jean, and our volunteers are the lifeblood of the work that we do. Now, this morning, it's also my pleasure to welcome our very special guest, State Representative Cheeseman of the 37th Assembly District. She's the ranking member of the legislature's Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. And Representative Cheeseman, good morning. And can you tell us a little bit about your background outside of the legislature, and what towns you represent also, and what other committees do you serve on in addition to the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding?
Good morning. Good morning, John. Good morning, Jean. It's a pleasure to be here. So my background, I grew up in New London and lived there until I graduated from college with my folks. I'm blessed to still have my dad with me. He's a retired radiologist. He's 95 and still all there. I pick up the Sunday Times every Sunday so he can do the crossword puzzle. I lived in London for 12 years, and where I worked in magazine publishing, and where I met my husband. And we had 2 sons together, and he had 3 daughters, so a blended family of 5. Moved back to the States in '88, and after a brief stay in New Jersey, resettled in first East Lyme and then Niantic, where my husband started his own public relations company. And so I raised my boys here, and then worked with my husband in his business. Unfortunately, he died in 2012, and I closed the business. But a couple of years later, I started working at the Niantic Children's Museum as the executive director, where I still am. And I actually ran for this seat in 2010 against the incumbent and lost, and then was served on the East Lyme Board of Selectmen for 3 terms. And when Representative Jatila opted to retire in 2016, I ran for the seat, and I've been fortunate enough to be reelected 3 times. I'll be campaigning for my 4th term this November. And it's been such an honor and pleasure to serve my community. My other 2 committees are general law, on which I was ranking member before finance, and the Energy and Technology Committee.
That's great. And I have to say, with these 2 great women here, I feel awfully inadequate hearing their backgrounds. However, I'm so happy to have both of you with us today. Jean.
Yeah, Representative, could you tell us a little bit more about your role as the ranking member of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, and the role of the committee, and what state legislative procedures does the committee have jurisdiction over?
Sure. Well, as you know, in the Connecticut legislature, we have joint committees, which means there'll be a chair from the House, a chair from the Senate, and then a ranking member from each chamber. And as the Republicans are the minority, I'm the ranking member from the House. Henry Martin is the ranking member from the Senate, and Sean Scanlon, House chair, and Senator John Fanfara, Senate chair. And we have cognizance over all matters relating to generating revenue for the state. So we are sort of the taxation side. The Appropriations Committee decides how to spend the money, and we decide where we're going to get the money. So that's it in a nutshell. And my position as ranking member, typically, chairs and rankings will meet, will screen bills, will help decide which bills move forward for a public hearing, which bills are going to be voted out of committee. So it's a collaborative process in that way.
And that's great. So Representative Cheeseman, very important position as ranking member, the voice of your caucus on that committee. And so what are some of your priorities for Finance, Revenue and Bonding Committee this session?
Well, I think one of the things that, as you will know, John, from my time on energy, I'm always concerned with what can we do to make Connecticut more affordable? How can we structure tax policy not only to benefit our residents, but also to benefit the businesses, which are in, let's face it, a vibrant economy needs successful businesses that want to be located in Connecticut, remain in Connecticut, employ lots of people, because that's where we get the revenue that's going to support all the programs we want to do. So among the things I'm looking at, I know the governor has proposed restoring that property tax credit eligibility to everyone, not just seniors, and move it from 200 to 300. I actually proposed last year to restore the full $500 property tax credit to all taxpayers, regardless of age and income. We have never indexed our income tax brackets or deductions to inflation. And I think we need to start doing that. I know Connecticut Voices for Children in their meeting said if we had actually done that since the inception of the income tax, I think the couple's deduction would be worth $47,000. So that's something that's a priority for me. In addition to the property tax credit, we've seen such a huge increase in rents. I'd like to look at a tax credit for some renters. Massachusetts allows renters to take a tax deduction. So maybe we look at something like that. Again, looking at affordability. The governor proposed accelerating the ability to exclude 401k and annuities from income tax. That was another one of our proposals. So those are sort of my finance related issues this session.
Well, Representative Cheeseman, we'd be remiss if we didn't say again, thank you for your work on the retirement income, excluding retirement income from the state income tax. That was an important thing, and we were very happy to recognize you as one of our champions last session for your work on the Finance Committee and making sure that people can deduct, that retirement income, Social Security, pensions, and others. So that's a big thing for our members, and people really don't realize that. Senior citizens, people that are retired, actually, the statistics show contribute more to the economic well-being of the state of Connecticut than those in the workforce. So it's important that we keep those folks here in the state of Connecticut. So we thank you for your work on that, and we really appreciate that.
So there's a lot of talk about the tax relief this year, and it's a big priority, as John mentioned, for AARP and its members. How do you see the debate shaping up during this session?
I think you're going to see agreement that, particularly as we have some robust revenue coming in, that we look at tax relief for our residents. I know my House Chair, Representative Scanlon, is very keen to put his child tax credit through. I'm not ruling anything out, but I think it's important that we have something that's broad-based. And as we look at things that will in effect reduce revenue, we have to make sure that what we put into place is sustainable. Because so often state and too often we institute these policies and then the economy goes south and we're taking everything away. So I think sustainability is key.
Representative, that's right on the money. I mean, just as an example, when your caucus and your caucuses really championed the retirement income deductions, and then finally when everybody got on board and we got it and it was phased in, for year after year after year, they're like Lucy in the football, pulling the rug out from underneath people, and people plan and they plan on what they're going to do in their retirement, right. and so that's why we're so appreciative of the work that you all did to maintain that, and not only maintain it, but expand it. And so, we fully understand that's one of the principles that AARP has when it comes to tax relief, that it's equitable, fair, and that it's sustainable, right? Yeah. Because we don't want to create something that isn't, and that we're going to take away and make false promises. So
keyword sustainable. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really, really interesting. So now you said you served on the Energy and Technology Committee, and that's one of the other committees that AARP spends a lot of time. And I know you've always had, as you said earlier, about your role in the Tax Committee. I know in almost every Energy and Technology Committee that you've been at since you've been in the legislature, which has been your whole tenure. You've always said that you're looking out for what's in the best interest of ratepayers. We pay the highest rates. In the continental U.S., and we appreciate your stewardship over there. So what are some of your priorities for that committee, whether, and any of the topics that go before the Energy and Technology Committee?
Well, I know one of yours is the whole third-party supplier issue, and I think it's very easy to get lured in by attractive prices, and then, whether you're talking electricity, whether you're talking about cable or internet, these teaser rates that look great, and then after 6 months or 9 monts, all of a sudden, well, I should have gone with a standard plan. So I think, diving deeper into that, and I think on a larger scale, what was it? Electricity prices are up 10.7% nationwide, up 4.2% in January alone. We have to, as we, do these power purchase agreements, and man, John, I know you disagreed with this, but that Millstone deal is looking awfully smart now. We guaranteed that rate, well, at $49.99, and if you look at the ISO rates now with natural gas, they're over $150, megawatt hour. Anyway, but as we phase in, new power purchase agreements, we're getting to a carbon-free society, that we do it in a way that keeps it affordable, and in a way that doesn't, as if we have intermittent sources, we're not paying at the same time for natural gas plants to be there just in case, or, So what we do, the decisions we make in the legislature can have such an effect on everyone's lives, and, worthy goals. But if you're, living on a fixed income, if you are looking at your budget, we have to be cognizant of the fact that, oh, by the way, we want an all electric society, but that means the utilities are going to have to invest $6 billion in the grid, and they're going to pass that cost on to you. So how do we achieve our goals in a way that takes into account the needs of the people who are listening to this broadcast?
And that's absolutely right, Representative Cheeseman. And it's another one, just like we talked about in finance, there has to be a balance. That's why AARP, we never go into the Energy Committee, talking down any environmental goal or priority that anybody sets or initiative that they take on. We just try to look for a balance. You have to not only, as you like to say, look for what's in the best interest of the environment and the economy, but what's in the best interest of the ratepayers who are burdened so much, as you noted. So, we appreciate that. And I will say you're always fair and open with us, and it's always great to have a dialogue with you about these issues because they're important. So we talked about finance, we talked about energy. What else, are you working on that's a priority for you that maybe, would be of interest to the public out there?
Well, I've been very involved in domestic violence prevention, working very closely with Safe Futures, which is our local organization there, and the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I was pleased to see the governor included additional funding for that. The pandemic has created so many what I call invisible victims. We all know of the death toll, the people who have lost their lives and people who have lost loved ones because of this terrible virus. But when we look at the numbers of, domestic violence victims, where this is, not only the people who suffer it, but the children who are involved, the toll has been immense. 1,300 substance abuse deaths in Connecticut, child abuse, and the whole mental health and mental, suicide. So that's always been a big priority for me. What can we do to raise awareness, both of, the issues surrounding domestic violence, the access and help we need to provide to the survivors, and the same with suicide. And unfortunately, it's middle-aged and older people, particularly middle-aged men, who are, the most likely to take their own lives. With what we did in the pandemic, the public health measures we took in many ways, although achieving their goal and keeping people safe, you removed everything that made life worth living for a lot of people. When we looked at families with loved ones in nursing homes who were not allowed to see them except at the end of life. And one of the things I'm proud of in the legislature, we actually passed into legislation that you can designate an essential caregiver who will always be able to go and see you. I have a dear friend whose mom was in an assisted living facility in Arizona, and there was a lockdown and they were not allowed to see her from March to July. And they'd moved her to the dementia wing. And my friend is convinced that it was that isolation, that lack of contact with family and friends that led to this. So I think a big priority for me is still dealing with those invisible victims of the pandemic. And how do we help everyone heal, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally?
Yeah, older Americans, the pandemic took a toll on them, their mental health, with social isolation. You said not only those that were in the nursing homes and were isolated, but also those that were isolated from grandchildren and loved ones as well. And that's why the legislation and the work that you all did on the Energy Committee around high-speed internet and broadband access was so critical, because we can't, we have to be able to stay, if not physically connected, at least virtually connected, like we are here today.
One of the things I'm doing is working with the nursing homes to get some of that additional broadband funding to them, because again, we passed legislation that said, if you want to, and your roommate, your loved one has permission of the roommate or is in a single room, to put internet-based monitoring in. So at the very least, you can see them, they're well. But again, the amount of infrastructure investment required is enormous. So if we pass legislation, we should help the nursing homes, find the funding to bring that about. And the whole digital divide, I was so conscious. I would get phone calls from, and very often, older constituents. I need to check on my economic stimulus payment from the feds, but they said I have to go log on to irs.gov and I don't have a computer. I don't have a smartphone. How do I do this? In our move to the digital culture, we forget. We can be leaving many people out. And we have to make sure that we don't. I mean, maybe you equip every senior center with, 10 iPads that are Wi-Fi enabled, so they can go into people's homes, bond them, whatever you need to do. I have to help you do this, because it's wonderful when it works, but sometimes you need that person to help you go through that. I'm so proud of myself these days when I can make Microsoft Teams or Zoom or WebEx, any of the GoToMeeting work. It's like, oh my gosh, I made the technology work. So not all of us have 13-year-olds, boys or girls who can help us figure it out.
So as a grandmother during this pandemic too, I have a number of little guys, and It was so painful. For a year, we did not have any physical contact, but we were able to do FaceTime. And, it was fun. And I often thought about these people who have no access and saw no family members. It is, as you said, these silent victims that we don't even know about. Yeah.
So Jean, why don't you bring us home? We're coming close to the end here.
Yeah. So I have testified and really enjoyed testifying before the General Assembly in the past many times. So how can the public stay informed about what's happening, and what ways can they actually participate in the process now?
So if you go to cj.ct.gov, you'll see the sort of state General Assembly website, and you'll see the calendar of the week. It will list public hearings. And if you go down there's a link to the bulletin, which is basically the calendar that will list the committee meetings and public hearings coming up. And again, I think one of the good things that came out of the pandemic, although I missed being there in person, was giving people the ability to testify online. And I hope going forward, we find some way to come up with some sort of hybrid model.
Right.
So you will see, the public health committees having a hearing on, drug prices. And there will be an explanation of how you can submit testimony, and then an email address and the format you want to use, and a link to, if you actually want to physically or virtually deliver your testimony, how to go about that. And it's a great way to stay informed. Every individual legislator will have a website where they'll provide updates. I know I do have that, and a Facebook page. I'll also send out periodic emails, so you can sign up to receive emails from your legislator about, different things that are going on. But if you go to that cga.ct.gov website, you will find probably more than you wanted to know. And you can actually, CTN will broadcast committee meetings and public hearings. And when we meet in the chamber, broadcast that live. And you can also watch that from there, as well as on many of your public access channels.
That's great. Thank you so much.
We appreciate it. I do want to just close by thanking our volunteer, Jean Caron from Old Saybrook, a great volunteer. And our volunteers, as I said, are the lifeblood of the work we do, whether it's advocacy or community service projects. And I especially want to thank our very special guest, State Representative Holly Cheeseman, who it's always such a pleasure to work with. And I thank you for always being open and accessible to us and our members. So any closing words from you, Representative Cheeseman?
No, I want to thank you, John, and Eugene, and all your volunteers for what you do, because I think having a trusted advocate, someone who can help you, explain a situation, be there with resources. You do so much, I lose track of the number of things that AARP does. So it's been a real pleasure to be here today. It's wonderful. Being a state representative was never anything that was on my ambition list. But when I talk to young people, I say, you know what? When a door opens, don't be afraid to walk through it. We have to keep trying the older we get, we have to keep trying new things. You can teach old dogs new tricks, people.
You've got that right. So everybody, we really appreciate you for joining us this morning for another edition of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut. And for now, we'll see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.